Have you ever heard of the Enfield Poltergeist? It is one of the most famous and terrifying hauntings ever recorded. And unlike most ghost stories, this one had dozens of witnesses. It all began in 1977 in a modest council house in Enfield, North London. A single mother named Peggy Hodgson lived there with her 4 children. Life was ordinary until one night in August when Peggy heard a crash coming from her daughter's bedroom. She rushed upstairs and froze. The heavy chest of drawers in the room was moving on its own. It slid across the floor as if pushed by invisible hands. When Peggy tried to shove it back, it resisted, as though something was holding it in place. From that night on, the Hodgson home became a place of terror. The activity grew stronger each day. Furniture overturned by itself. Strange knocking echoed through the walls. Objects flew across rooms. Most terrifying of all, Peggy's 11-year-old daughter, Janet, began speaking in a deep, gravelly voice, nothing like her own. Witnesses described her voice as male, guttural, and disturbing. When asked who was speaking, the entity replied, "I'm Bill. Just Bill." The Hodgson family was terrified. Word spread quickly, and soon paranormal investigators arrived. Among them were Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair of the Society for Psychical Research. They documented the case for over a year, recording tapes of the voices, photographing objects in midair, and even witnessing levitations. Janet was seen rising off her bed, as if something had lifted her. Neighbors swore they saw her flung across the room by unseen hands. Police officers who came to the house claimed they saw chairs move across the floor without anyone touching them. Skeptics argued it was a hoax. They claimed Janet was faking the voices, or that the children staged the events for attention. But others insist there was no way children could have produced the terrifying phenomena that took place. The case became so famous that decades later, it inspired the horror film The Conjuring 2. To this day, the Enfield Poltergeist remains one of the most chilling and controversial hauntings ever investigated. So what do you believe? Was the Hodgson family tormented by a real spirit? Or was it one of the greatest paranormal hoaxes in history? In the small town of Villisca, Iowa, in 1912, a horrifying crime shocked the entire community. A crime so brutal, it still haunts the town more than a century later. On the night of June 10th, the Moore family, Josiah and Sarah Moore, and their 4 children, returned home after a church service. That night, 2 young neighbor girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, stayed over for a sleepover. 8 people slept peacefully in the small white house. But by morning, they were all dead. When neighbors grew suspicious after the family didn't appear the next day, they entered the home. What they found was pure horror. Each member of the Moore family, and the Stillinger sisters, had been bludgeoned to death with an axe. The killer had used such force that ceilings and walls were splattered with blood. Even more disturbing, every mirror in the house had been covered with cloth. The windows were shrouded, and a plate of uneaten food sat on the kitchen table, as if the killer had calmly prepared himself a meal after the murders. The investigation shocked the quiet farming town. Dozens of suspects were questioned, including neighbors, traveling preachers, and even a state senator. But no one was ever convicted. Some theories suggest the murders were committed by a serial killer who struck in other towns with similar crimes. Others believe it was someone local, someone the family knew. The case remains unsolved. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder house still stands, and it has become one of the most haunted locations in America. Visitors claim to hear footsteps, children's voices, and doors slamming shut. Some even say they've seen shadowy figures holding an axe. Over 100 years later, the mystery remains. Who killed the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters? And why? We may never know. Have you ever heard of the Hinterkaifeck Murders? It is one of the most chilling, unsolved crimes in history. A story of strange footsteps, whispers in the attic, and a brutal slaughter that has haunted Germany for more than a century. This is not fiction. This really happened. Life on Hinterkaifeck Farm. The year was 1922. Deep in the forests of Bavaria, about 70 kilometers north of Munich, stood a lonely farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. It was remote, no neighbors nearby, surrounded by dark woods and quiet fields. Living on the farm was the Gruber family. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, a harsh, controlling man, disliked by many. His wife, Kazilia, 72, quiet, but weary from a lifetime under Andreas' iron rule. Their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35 years old. Victoria's two children, 7-year-old Kazilia and little Joseph, just 2 years old. The family had recently hired a new maid, Maria Baumgartner. She arrived at the farm on March 31st, 1922. She was nervous. Her sister had walked her there that day. Maria's sister later said the house felt cold, wrong, as if something evil already lingered in the walls. That night would be Maria's first day of work, and tragically, it would also be her last. The strange occurrences. In the days leading up to the murders, strange things began happening at Hinterkaifeck. Andreas Gruber told his neighbors that he had seen strange footprints in the snow. They led from the forest straight to his farm, but there were no prints leading back. At night, he claimed to hear footsteps coming from the attic. He searched the house, but found nothing. Then, one of the family's house keys went missing. No one could explain where it had gone. Their maid at the time had quit suddenly, telling friends the house was haunted. Andreas dismissed it, but unease spread through the household. What Andreas didn't know was that these were warnings. The murders. On March 31st, 1922, the killer struck. The details are still debated, but investigators believe this is what happened. One by one, members of the family were lured into the barn. First Andreas, then his wife, Kazilia, then Victoria. Finally, young Kazilia, just 7 years old. Each was slaughtered with a mattock, a farming tool with a heavy blade, like an axe. Their skulls were smashed in, their bodies stacked together, covered with hay. Inside the farmhouse, the killer turned next to the maid, Maria. She was murdered in her bed, only hours after arriving for her very first day of work. Then, 2-year-old Joseph was killed in his crib. An entire family, plus their maid. 6 victims, all butchered in a single night. The horrors after. But the nightmare did not end there. What disturbed investigators most was this. The killer stayed in the house. 4 days after the murders, neighbors reported smoke rising from the farmhouse chimney. Food had been eaten. The cows had been milked. The dog had been fed. Someone lived in the farmhouse, surrounded by the corpses of the murdered family. The discovery. It wasn't until April 4th, 4 days later, that neighbors finally investigated. When they entered the barn, they found the bodies piled beneath hay. Inside, they discovered Maria's body in bed and little Joseph still in his crib. The scene was horrific. Blood stained the walls. The silence of the farmhouse was unbearable. The police arrived, but what they uncovered only deepened the mystery. The investigation. Dozens of suspects were questioned. One man stood out, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor. He was rumored to be Victoria's lover. Some even believed he was Joseph's father. When Lorenz came to the farm after the murders, witnesses noticed something strange. He acted as if he knew the house well. He unlocked doors without searching for keys. Some even said he seemed too calm, but there was never enough evidence to charge him. Others suggested traveling robbers, but nothing was stolen. Valuables were still inside the house. Some suggested multiple killers working together, but no one knows how they could have gone unseen. Andreas Gruber himself had many enemies in the village. Was it revenge? Or was the crime motivated by something darker, something within the family itself? Theories. Over the years, theories have piled up. Some say it was Lorenz Schlittenbauer killing the family in a fit of rage over Joseph's paternity. Others suggest it was a serial killer traveling through the countryside. Some believe it was a robbery gone wrong, though nothing was taken. And then there are the stranger theories. That Andreas was right, that the house was haunted, that the family had been cursed. One chilling detail haunts investigators. 7-year-old Kazilia, when found, had tufts of hair pulled from her own head. It appeared she lived for several hours after her skull was fractured, lying beside the bodies of her family. And in that time, she had torn out her own hair in agony. The legacy, the farm at Hinterkaifeck, was eventually demolished. But the land remains. And so does the mystery. For more than a century, historians, detectives, and even modern forensic experts have tried to solve the crime. But every theory ends the same way, with more questions than answers. 6 people, an entire family wiped out. The killer never found. The truth never revealed. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in history. So now I ask you, what do you believe? Was it a jealous neighbor? A wandering killer? Or something much darker? Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the stories, and comment one of your stories, and it might be included in the next video.